Hi, this is Tim at the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details. Reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase, pricing, and availability questions concerning this watch. Today we're discussing a year 2000 retailed watch sold in Lisbon, Portugal. This is an FP Journe Tourbillon Souverain, conventionally described as a Tourbillon Remontoir 3rd series. You can see the watch, that characteristic design that Journe first prototyped in 1991 and brought to market under his eponymous brand beginning in 1999. So this watch in rose gold is the discontinued 38mm case size. You can see that from lug tip to lug tip, it is a wonderfully agreeable 44.8 millimeters, 9.4 millimeters thick. It has a 20mm spacing between the lugs. We'll throw it on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, and it wears nicely. I would say that this watch would wear on a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference. It is quite compact. Today, we would consider this to be a unisex size. I consider it to be a versatile size. So if you have a taste for tradition as well as rarity, these 38mm cases really are the setup. It has no trouble clearing a dress cuff, as you could see. And even from over the top, which exaggerates the width of a watch, you can see I have plenty of clearance, and that's made more obvious down the barrel. The strap is newer than the watch itself, so you can see it's a combination of medium and large rectangular scale alligator leather, semi-gloss, medium blue, monotone stitch, folded edge. More recent Journe strap, you can see it has small round scale alligator on the bottom, gator on both sides, making for a more expensive but also more durable strap. When this watch was originally shipped back in 2000, it would have featured a strap with gator on the top and cav on the bottom. Just making sure I mention that for the sake of history. Pull-tab spring bars, and that allows you to remove the strap without tools. And because the lugs are drilled fairly close to the case, curved spring bars are used to make sure there's no impediment to the motion of the strap. We have a simple rose gold pin buckle, and you can see the hallmarking, the maker's mark, are on the inside of the buckle. Now you can see a Swiss hallmark right there, but you will note that we actually have French hallmarks on the watch. So this is an Eleanor made case. There's the Eleanor maker's mark. Eleanor was in the greater Parisian area for decades, Journe's go-to for cases. That's why we have the French double eagle hallmarked onto the case. The watch also features the Swiss hallmark, and the timepiece, of course, with a French-made case that was discontinued at about mid-2008 when Journe bought Eleanor and moved his case-making operation from France to Geneva to take his case-making in-house. Now, while we're on the case back, I may as well highlight some of the features, including a 00 case fabrication year. Until about mid-2005, Journe cases would feature the year the case was made, not necessarily the watch, but the year the case was made on the case back, and then T is the reference. You can also see that these are early casebacks. These are very shallow engraved features. Tourbillon Souverain, the reference, FP Journe, he made it, or he invented it and made it, I should say. Now the watch, of course, part of the 3rd series. First, second, and third series, you're just talking a few dozen examples. Most of the Journe Tourbillon Remontoir prior to the 2004 redesign, most of them were either 4th series or they were the Ruthenium series. Those are the most numerous. This watch right here, part of those earlier series that had some of these incredibly early features such as the shallow engraving, but one you won't find on many others is this little relic of the fact that the watch was actually retailed in Lisbon, Portugal. So I can't quite show you in the greatest detail, but these are national and regional hallmarks on the side, such as, for example, the 18-karat gold swallow stamp, and the fact that this is both a national hallmarking and a city hallmarking and laterally imprinted on the case makes the watch fairly unique, as I can't imagine there were a whole lot of 3rd series watches sold in Lisbon, Portugal. Now, in terms of condition, very good overall. You can see there are some little hairline marks on the flank, but we're not going to polish it. We're not going to diminish the metal. We like to keep these things as intact as possible, especially since here we have the shallow caseback engravings and these unusual hallmarks, which are quite deep and well-defined. Journe cases are fairly simple, and actually, you could look at the latest vertical Tourbillon Souverain, and you will find that it's a bigger version of the same design. Integrated lugs that sweep down almost 90 degrees from the horizontal of the case, all in high polish, domed case back and bezel, flange of the bezel and the case back defining the mid case, and then Journe's very distinctive double dimple knurled crown without signature. On the dial side, you can see one of the characteristics of these early watches. So while we have a gold dial, it has an unusual amount of patina to it. You can also see it's got a little bit of a shimmery look to it, as the varnish on the dial here adds both a bit of glossy gleam and then the uneven discoloration that you'll note across the different features of the dial. Generally around some of the fixed dial features, the border as well as the printing, you start to see a little bit of a darkening in contrast to the lightness of the remainder of the dial. You can see this is a 3rd series watch. It doesn't have the first 2 series rounded remontoir cock, and it doesn't have the 1st series souscription, individual numbering, but it also doesn't have the 4th series small dial side screws. So as long as you see these big screws and you have a flat remontoir cock, you know you're looking at a 3rd series. Of course, the distinctive tapered Journe hands in blue. We have a power reserve indicator indicating first that the watch has 42 hours of power reserve, which is true, but Journe watches that are designed to a chronometer standard, his chronometer standard, or advertised as chronomet, feature reverse acting power reserves like a marine chronometer, for which it was important to wind the watch exactly 24 hours from the last winding. So it was important to know how many hours since the last winding, not how many hours of running left. So when this watch is fully wound, it indicates 0 hours since the last winding. Now, 28 hours elapsed, the remontoir, the constant force device that allows constant amplitude, it will deactivate after 28 hours, and you'll know, first of all, because you'll see the index is approaching 30, but also because this little jumper right here will start scrolling smoothly. So that's your cue that you got to wind the watch. The watch features a 1-minute tourbillon beating at 3 hertz. You can see that it's quite nicely decorated. These early Journe watches are more obviously handmade than the later ones, which means they're not as perfect, but they're also not as clinical. And I kind of like that. The tourbillon here is 6-position adjusted. It's free sprung for durability with eccentric masses on the balance used to make most of the adjustments. It's got an overcoil hairspring which allows for concentric breathing in every position, a feature that is not universal across Journe watches. The physical features of the tourbillon, the cage, and the bridge are better finished than you'll find on not only other parts of this movement, but on most other Journe timepieces, as the dial side tourbillon has always been a prestige item. Now, on the reverse side, you can see the linear spring that's part of the remontoir system, as well as 1 blued screw, which I adore. The movement, 1498, that's 14 French lean, and work began on the movement in 1998. Truth be told, it started years earlier, but officially this execution was 1998. 25 joules. You can see this is a brass caliber. Brass movements discontinued mid-2004 as Journe made the transfer to gold, which is more valuable as a commodity, but also less valuable as a collectible, because they are not making any more brass movement watches, and certainly no more 3rd series tourbillon remontoirs. This is a highly collectible watch on that basis too. The remontoir is an interesting system originally developed by John Harrison that allows a watch to maintain constant amplitude by acting as a buffer between the barrel and the escapement. And so the idea is that via that intermediate spring, which unloads once a second to the escapement, you get constant amplitude and you can adjust the watch very precisely. Back in its day, this would have been 30 meters water resistant. I highly recommend you never test that theory. And as you can see on the reverse side, there's some handsome elements, the most romantic of which is that single blued screw, but then also this lovely swan's neck style click and click spring to prevent the watch from running backwards. If you love this watch, there's a lot to love. Reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.